Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Road to Liberty podcast. This is Token, your host, and it's an honor to be speaking to you tonight. Before we get into today's episode, a couple things we want to mention. Due to Facebook being jackasses, I apparently am not worthy of using their live streaming service. So that is why this episode and other episodes that I am involved in might not come through live on Facebook. So until we get that straightened out, or until Facebook decides to get their heads out of their asses, I will not be live streaming to you. I will be recording these and then posting them later to all our different services, which YouTube, Facebook, and anywhere that you get your podcasts. So there's that. Remember, we have another episode of Token and Hobbs coming out tomorrow night. That's going to be Tuesday the 24th. And next week, we're going to be talking to Dr. Kyle Varner about the recent vaping scare that has everybody running for their lives, fearful that they're going to catch watermelon-flavored cancer or something. So that should be fun. We'll be talking about prohibition and the history behind that and why this recent scare is a bunch of nonsense. But before that, we have a guest tonight. One Mr. T.J. Roberts. You may remember him from, we had him on the show before debating Dr. Kyle Varner. That was one of our most listened to episodes. We're glad to have him back on the show. He is the VP of the Liberty Institute for Freedom and Economics. He's a student at Transylvania University and a contributor at the Advocates for Self-Government. Welcome back to the show, Mr. Roberts.
Thanks for having me on, Token.
Absolutely. Thank you for using my proper name. That means very much to me. So we decided to have you on because you had an article that you wrote, and it was about Meghan McCain. It was specifically about a interaction she had on The View, that nest of cackling hens that everybody loves so much, with Pamela Anderson. For some reason, I can't say her name correctly. So before we get into,
you have Kamala Harris in your head, don't you?
I might. You know, it's hard to distinguish between two fools, but apparently Pamela Anderson is not the fool that people may have thought she was. She actually expressed some very good thoughts on Julian Assange. So before we get into this, I thought we might play a little bit of the interaction she had with Meghan McCain so we could share our thoughts on that before getting into the article. So let's see what they had to say.
He was allegedly kicked out of the Ecuadorian embassy because he was defecating everywhere and creating messes.
No, well, that's a smear campaign. That's not true.
There was video of things that happened. I mean, I don't.
What would you do if you were locked in a room for
really quick
6 years?
Well, I wouldn't be a cyber terrorist, which he is. He hacked information. His leaks included classified documents that put our national security at risk, our military,
you know who
and the lives of spies and diplomats
is the military. How many people have the American government killed innocently, and how many has WikiLeaks?
So you think the military is putting the government at risk?
The military has put many innocent lives at risk.
Oh, calm down, sir.
Yeah, so I'm going to stop it right there because you actually had some stuff to say about that specific exchange. So why don't you go into it a little bit? Here's Meghan McCain accusing Julian Assange of being a cyber terrorist and telling Pamela Anderson to calm down, sir, because she's pointing out the fact that the U.S. government has killed thousands and thousands of innocent people overseas. So what was your take when you heard this?
So at first I was overwhelmed by how impressed I was that Pamela Anderson is here discussing the fact that we are a country that is ruled by a military-industrial complex that has killed millions of innocent people across the globe. And the second go-around, I started to think about more of what Meghan McCain was saying. Particularly, I was baffled at the fact that she got so mad that she snapped at an audience member who I presume paid for tickets to be there. And on the third watch through, I started to pity Meghan McCain, which is the article title, I Pity Meghan McCain. Because what she said there was, so you think that the military is a threat to the government? Pamela Anderson is talking about human life. She's not talking about the United States government. She's not talking about some overpowered entity. No, she's talking about people who lost their lives due to our aggressive foreign policy. By our, I mean the U.S. government. It shows that she is so thoroughly indoctrinated into the war party's propaganda that she's incapable of seeing beyond the state. She truly is Mussolini's mantra of all within the state, nothing outside the state, and nothing against the state. And that is largely, if I had to take a guess, I would say her father's fault. He's the one who lived his life in politics, started out his first full-time job was U.S. military, where, of course, he got several of his fellow sailors killed in the USS Forrestal incident, then became a U.S. senator, and there was never a war John McCain did not like. And it just demonstrates that the state is the end-all, be-all for the McCain family, and I highly doubt Meghan McCain would be like that if she was raised by a normal human being. That's the thing, is that she was raised by an absolute sociopath. So it was one of those things where I'm disgusted by what she said, but in regards to her, I just felt downright pity for her. That she just wants to be so much like her father that she's willing to disregard the basic decency that is due to human life.
Yeah, that's the thing about this whole thing that's just so frustrating, because John McCain, for all his faults, isn't too far outside the mainstream of American politics. Yes, he's more warmongery than most, I'll give you that, but when you really come down to things, John McCain was not a radical by the standards of mainstream politics. His positions are further to the warmongering spectrum than, say, Barack Obama, but not that much. You know, so Meghan McCain never had to face the reality that her father's policies led to. She never had to face the fact that her father, if he were a man in power in any other country besides the United States, he'd be considered a warmonger and a war criminal. You know, if this dude was the leader of some Middle Eastern country, the whole world would have condemned him as a terrorist upon his death. But because he was a respectable senator, a war hero within the United States government, he gets to die a respectable man instead of the war criminal he is. And his daughter, Meghan McCain, has never been forced to acknowledge the reality that her father was not indeed a great man.
Yeah. And one thing that's interesting is you'll have people nowadays like, well, regardless of his beliefs, he was a decent human being. That is the farthest thing from the truth possible. His personality was his policies first. And second, let's just talk about what he did when he wasn't, voting to fund the bombing of brown children. He was, having an affair with his disabled wife, whom he eventually left for dead. That's one example. He was using Daddy's position as an admiral to get a pass for killing several people aboard the USS Forrestal because he has an addiction to wet starting his jet. Yeah, not exactly the shining pinnacle of virtue in America here. And it's one of those things to where I just see this, it's like, if you were not an American, if you lived in a country where you saw the reality of John McCain's foreign policy, you would condemn that man and you would have celebrated the day that man died. Simple reality. I'm not saying that's the way it should be, but I'm also not saying that he should have been able to go and bomb these countries. Quite frankly, I care far more about what someone did to those foreign countries than the way that they act in conversation.
Yeah, and that's the thing about that whole line of thinking, like, regardless of what his beliefs were, regardless of his voting record, like, no, you don't get to say, there is no regardless there. A man is defined by his actions, and his actions are governed by the things he believes. You don't get to say, despite his beliefs and actions, he was a good man, because you define good and bad by a man's actions. And the actions of John McCain are those of a war criminal. They're those of a man who never saw a country he didn't want to bomb, who never saw a conflict he didn't want to get involved in, and had no understanding whatsoever of the geopolitical problems that plague regions that he wanted to get involved in. You know, John McCain, I don't think you can blame you place all the blame on any one conflict on John McCain, because John McCain never rose above the status of senator. But every single conflict we've been in, you can blame at least part of that on John McCain, at least so far as he's been in the Senate, because this man has been the state's #1 cheerleader for war and genocide across this globe, and people consider him just a mainstream politician, which is really the sad part about this. He's never been forced to take account for his actions.
Yep.
It's really quite despicable. I wanted to read a section from your article here, and I quote, "At an especially testy part in the exchange, Anderson explained that the U.S. military has killed far more people than WikiLeaks could ever imagine. After she said this, McCain responded to Anderson by asking, 'So you think the military is putting the government at risk?' I didn't notice this line at first, but when I saw the video again, I felt chills thinking about this quotation. Pamela Anderson just pointed out that the military has killed thousands, if not millions, of innocent people, and the only response you have is that the military doesn't endanger the government? In order to believe this, you have to believe that there is no line dividing the people and the state. One does not come to think of the best interests of the state when the death of innocents come to mind, unless they are conditioned to think that way." So a lot of people fall for this fallacy that we are the state. And you take issue with that here, especially. So why is that, I guess?
So one of the top reasons why I take issue with that is, let's just think it through right now. As our estimates show that in the 20th century, government killed 250 million people. An overwhelming majority of those were their own people that they killed. If you believe we are the government, then you believe that those 250 million murder victims committed suicide. You believe that innocent civilians, children, women, individuals that have fallen victim to drone bombings at the U.S. government's behest, they deserved it because they live in countries that have had terrorist activities before. You believe that the Jews who suffered under the Holocaust put it upon themselves. Also, it just comes down to the fact that it's simply not true. The fact of the matter is that we are not the state, and the state is not us, just off of the simple foundation that not everyone here has consented to the state and its edicts. If we are the state, then the state would be based upon unanimous consent, which it so clearly is not. How do you know? There are people in prison right now. The fact that people are in prison for victimless crimes. Let's think about the fact that public policy, it's not determined by public opinion. In spite of the fact that most people, for example, believe in lower taxes, we see our taxes going up, whether it be through direct tax increases or through inflation. At the same time, you should be thankful that public opinion doesn't influence public policy. Every time that there was a shooting, you would see gun confiscations. But the fact of the matter is that the state is a system that is separate from the people. And it's one of those things that whenever someone says, you're against the state, you are against society. Well, they're taking away, they're blurring the lines of the difference between the institutions of civil society and of the state. They're saying that family, church, community, none of that existed before the government. In fact, they're going so far by saying we are the government that no one existed before the state, that the state created humanity, which is simply not true. It's putting this divine position upon the state, which I thoroughly reject.
Absolutely. And it reminds me of a Thomas Paine quote from Common Sense at the very beginning. I'm not going to read it here because it's too long. But yes, Thomas Paine during the beginning of Common Sense basically lays out that there is a difference between government and society. That one exists for the good of humanity, and the other exists to use a violent force against people. Now, libertarians have a long history of disagreeing about the degree to which the state should exist, whether it should exist at all or it should exist in a minimum form. But we all agree that there is a difference between state and society. And the state, so even people who believe it should exist at all believe it exists solely for the purpose of restraining man's darkest impulses to rape, rob, and murder. But yeah, the very idea that the state and the people are one and the same is absolutely ludicrous. So I want to go back to the video that inspired this whole thing and just play a little bit more of the exchange between these two.
He would have put it out there.
And also that
he had to
released her emails. I mean, the question I have though is like, what would you say to? I know, but that doesn't mean everything should be. The question I have though is like spies that go out and put their lives at risk, like Congressman Will Hurd, who we were just talking about, who's dedicated decades of his life to helping fight terrorism. It's classified information. I believe is classified for a reason. I do have some faith in the U.S. government, although as a
Okay, I want to stop right there. I do have some faith in the U.S. government, but it gets really big because she has to backtrack herself right here.
Conservative, I have less faith normally than liberals do. So
oh, but you have less faith than liberals do. It's like she caught herself too late in the contradiction and tried to backtrack herself.
Well, hold on, Megan. We just have to make sure that we're driving the speed limit with our trust in government.
Yeah, like, why do you have any trust in government at all? I mean, that's the whole premise, supposedly, of conservatism, is that you don't trust the government. You don't place your trust in them. We all know that's false because they absolutely do.
Well, her dad's welfare checks were signed by them, so of course she has faith in them.
Yeah, it's this crazy thing. She has to pretend to be some kind of small government conservative. So she has to backtrack herself when she says that she does have faith in government. My question is, why? Why would you have any faith at all in this government? I mean, her father wasn't exactly the biggest fan of Donald Trump. If you remember, they had some words to exchange before her father passed away. So she's placing her faith in the administration of a man that her father severely disapproved of. Yet she still wants to place her faith in said government. It's a very odd thing. It doesn't seem to make any sense.
She knows nothing but the government. That's largely the premise of this piece, is that she has grown up with the belief that without government, none of this would be my reality. That government creates her reality, in fact. So, of course she has faith in it. And of course she gets triggered whenever heroes like Julian Assange tell the truth. Whenever an award-winning journalist shows that this government is murdering millions of innocents, that they're committing war crimes that if any other country did anything comparable to what we're doing, the U.S. would be invading them right now. That's why, is that she simply has no knowledge or conception beyond it. And also on the foundation of it, it gives parasites like her and her family a means toward power. That's a simple reality. It's a lifestyle. It's a means by which you can come in, is take this direct path to power, and it feels really good because you're so unproductive that the only way that you can truly make a living is through the force of the state.
Absolutely. Let's listen a little bit more.
So what would you say to the spies who are putting themselves at risk for our national security with your relationship with him?
Well, I don't think there's nothing proven that he's actually put anybody at risk. They've gone through this over and over again, and I think that people like Edward Snowden, Chelsea Manning are heroes, and Julian Assange is a publisher.
Putin also thinks that.
Putin also thinks that. That makes you wrong. Oh, you gotta love that logic. This other guy I don't like thinks the same thing you do, therefore you must be wrong. Solid logic right there. I don't see how anyone could disagree with Meghan McCain on that point. Putin also thinks that. I mean, my God, what kind of 5-year-old rebuttal is that?
Well, it sounds
Putin
just like
thinks that.
It sounds just like your 5-year-old father, anyway. Take, for example, there was an initiative in the Senate to welcome Montenegro into NATO.
Oh, I remember this.
Right. Well, there wasn't a quorum in the U.S. Senate, which, according to the rules of order, which have descended from English common law, which are the foundation upon which the U.S. Constitution is written, you have to have a quorum in order to have a vote. Rand Paul notices the lack of quorum, and in spite of the fact that he's just about as bad as guns as Donald Trump is nowadays, he still bravely stood up and said, I object, and therefore stopped Montenegro from coming into NATO, which, if Montenegro joined NATO, that would have increased hostilities with Russia and would have put us one step closer to war. So John McCain, in all his heroism and of his great character, accuses Rand Paul for being an agent of Vladimir Putin because he has differing beliefs. Yeah, that's a man of character right there. I'm going to accuse you of being the agent of an enemy of the United States because I disagree with you. No other reason. I don't need a reason. I'm just going to call you the enemy of the state at that point, which, quite frankly, Rand Paul should have worn that with a badge of honor. I know his father would have.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a shame that Rand Paul isn't the politician that his father was. I still appreciate a lot of the stuff he does, but man, that guy likes playing the political game way too much.
What sucks about him is that I worked for hundreds of hours for him, and now here he is promoting red flag laws. So yeah, by the way, if anyone who's watching this, feel free to call Rand Paul's office and tell him to oppose any further gun control. And ask him if Ron plans on inviting him to Thanksgiving dinner after that bullshit.
All right, I think there's a little bit more we can get to here.
You would be considered him a whistle. I get that you consider him a whistleblower.
Well, he's a publisher.
He's also dangerous. Yeah.
But he's a publisher, and he's a publisher, and he supports whistleblowers.
He's certainly stirred up a lot in this country.
Well, he's a cyber terrorist. I'll say it.
The Republican Party
won. It's ridiculous. I'm not going to stand by this. It's ridiculous.
No, see, the first gut reaction when I heard Meghan McCain blurt out, but he's a cyber terrorist, was, bitch, your father's a war criminal. Who the hell are you to throw stones at other people? All right, you live in a gigantic, brittle glass house right now. You're accusing a man of being a cyber terrorist because he published information on the crimes of our government, information that we have a right to know. And you're sitting here throwing stones at him despite the fact that the only reason you're on this show, The View, at all is because your dear old daddy was a very popular and well-respected war criminal. So who the hell are you to be accusing other people of being terrorists? You, the daughter of the most infamous terrorist in the American government.
Well, the good Paul Ron once said that truth is treason in an empire of lies. So, of course, Julian Assange is a cyber terrorist because this government is built on lies. That's what Julian Assange's crime is telling the truth. He's received multiple awards as a journalist. All he has done is he has taken the truth and has published them. He has never been forced to issue a redaction. He has never issued a redaction, in fact, because the documents you see on WikiLeaks, they're true. Read them for yourself. Feel free. They're primary government documents that whistleblowers have been brave enough to come in and report on. These whistleblowers put their life, their families, and their careers on the line to tell the truth. They're heroes. And they're far more heroic than any warmonger who wants young people to go die for foreign interests.
And that's a tale as old as time. That's something that doesn't ever seem to change. Even now, American troops are on their way to Saudi Arabia to prop up a Saudi government that we sell billions of dollars worth of arms to. But apparently they can't defend themselves. They also need American blood to be spilled on their behalf, on behalf of this evil theocratic regime. So that's going to be fun.
I guess America first means Americans die first.
No, that always seems to be the way it is. And we didn't even get to the rest of this appearance on The View, because there was a lot of cackling about how Julian Assange helped Donald Trump win the election by get this, by publishing real, actual, undeniable emails from Hillary Clinton. And apparently he wasn't supposed to do this, because he didn't also have emails from Donald Trump to publish. So, of course, if you have dirt on one candidate, you have to wait till you have dirt on another candidate before you're allowed to publish it, apparently.
Well, that's the thing that the corporate press does. It's a very popular smear technique from left-wing media. The moment someone is doing something right, they're just going to tie him or her into Donald Trump. That's what they do. It makes sense coming from their perspective. Their goal is to prop up the war party. Their goal is to make the state as respectable as possible. So yes, when someone comes in and is being an absolute hero for freedom, they're going to be like, well, this is just helping Donald Trump. I don't care who the president is. I don't care what the president does as long as they're promoting liberty. I don't care who his associates are. Julian Assange, whether he supported Donald Trump or not, told the truth. He showed what a war criminal Hillary Clinton is, showed how much of an abhorrent human being she is, showed the odious nature of the government. I don't care if that helped Donald Trump. I wouldn't care if it helped Hillary Clinton. What I care about is that the truth is out there for those looking for it.
And see, the funniest thing about this whole situation is this is the same mainstream media that jumps at any opportunity to smear the opposite side of the aisle. Now, I'm no Donald Trump fan, and I'm no fan of Republicans. I spend a good portion of this show shitting all over the Republican Party and Donald Trump. No one who listens to this show can accuse me of being a Donald Trump fan, but we all know that the mainstream media has it out for the guy. And it doesn't matter how flimsy the story is, be it some uncorroborated new accusation against his Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh that doesn't even have a victim, or some flimsy story about him getting a spy exposed in Russia, which it turns out they were already going to pull him out before he was elected president, or some BS story about prostitutes pissing on a bed. They'd have no problem at all going with any flimsy story about Donald Trump. But here's this guy publishing real, actual, factual information on Hillary Clinton. And oh my God, you're giving the election to Donald Trump. How dare you publish this real news when we're busy publishing all this fake news to help the other party? That's the real frustrating thing about all this.
It's amazing because these people have never actually stopped to think whether or not they're actually one of the bad guys.
They're too busy patting themselves on the back for being brave, heroic journalists who go out there for exposing the truth for the people.
There's nothing, just to be clear, there's nothing brave about being a journalist in America. You're braver if you learn to code.
They should learn to code. Now, that's the funny thing. These people are not war correspondents. They're not riding with the troops in Afghanistan. They're not walking through the jungles of Burma. They're not doing anything like that. They're writing fake news about the president in a country where they will never be punished for any of that because we have the First Amendment here.
Right.
So there's nothing brave about speaking truth to power in the U.S. You are not in any danger at all, and you are not brave for doing it. You're just slimy journalists because you publish fake news, and we all know it.
When Jim Acosta is treated half as badly as Julian Assange is being treated right now, I will call him brave.
Was that the guy that got called Fredo?
No, that's Chris Cuomo.
I always get those two confused.
The number of times that Chris Cuomo has compared something to the N-word, you're going to think that everything in the English dictionary is the equivalent of the N-word for someone.
Well, see, fake news and Fredo are the two big ones I remember. That's the equivalent to the N-word. So we're running up on
every word that starts with the letter F is the equivalent to the N-word now.
Works for me. I hate that letter. Anyway, we are running up on 30 minutes. So why don't you plug your stuff real quick?
Sure, you can follow me on Facebook. My Twitter is @RealTJRoberts. I am a writer at the Advocates for Self-Government. You can find that at theadvocates.org. That's pretty much what's public right now. So yeah, no, feel free to contact me. I'd love to have further conversations with you all.
Absolutely. And we're going to have to make this a regular thing going forward because I love having you on the show. Always some interesting stuff to say. It's a shame we only had you on once, and this is only the second time you're coming on, so we're going to have to make this happen again.
Absolutely.
So, all right. So thank you again for coming on. Thank you for having this conversation, and thank you for your awesome article that gave us the opportunity to have this discussion. So, absolutely. So remember, everybody, like our Facebook page. We just passed 7,000 likes, so that was fun. We're going for 10,000 by the end of the year. So let's make that happen. We're also on Instagram, on Twitter, on Minds. What else are we on? We're on a bunch of stuff. Also, roadstothe2liberty.com. That's roadstothe2liberty.com is our website. We're on YouTube. We're on SoundCloud. Anywhere you find your podcast. So thank you guys for listening. Have a good night.